Trump administration this week moved to all but dismantle the Environmental Protection Agency, with the potential to bring some very real consequences, both for average Americans, their daily lives, and also for global efforts to tackle the climate crisis at large. Now, the agency's administrator announced some 36 deregulatory moves Wednesday, including landmark regulations that are aimed simply at guaranteeing clean air and clean water, and this all in the name of spurring the economy. For more, France 24's Antonia Kerrigan joins me now on set for a closer look. Then, Antonia, so the EPA administrator said that this isn't about abandoning environmental protection, but environmentalists view things quite differently. Can you take us through some of the headline announcements here?
Yes, well, as you say, there are 31 of these measures, far too many to list all of them off for you today. And it's also worth mentioning these aren't absolute measures. These are moves to reconsider various regulations. So they're not effective immediately. Some of them will take months and years to rewrite. But it's a roadmap, and it's a very radical roadmap. That more or less moves to turn the EPA on its head in terms of its function. Lee Zeldin said yesterday, as the Trump-appointed administrator for the EPA, said this was the most consequential day of deregulation in US history. He's very likely absolutely right about that. For instance, on fossil fuels, limits that were put in place on greenhouse gas emissions from power plants are to be reconsidered. Rules that regulated the levels of mercury and arsenic that were permissible in industrial effluents, notably from coal plants, are to be reconsidered and potentially done away with on the basis that they apparently improperly target coal. That's interesting, of course, because coal has been receding in the US for many years now. So if they are looking to turn that on its head, that could have a huge impact. The removal of coal, or the phasing out of coal, has been really the saving grace of the US's carbon footprint in recent years. If they turn that on its head, that could be really, really awful. Industry in general, they're looking to get rid of lots of reporting requirements on transparency of greenhouse gas emissions for companies and corporations, loosen regulations on soot emissions. They say all this is expensive red tape. They're packaging a lot of these messages, as you mentioned, as economic measures to decrease the cost of living for Americans. So we can really see a shift in the vision here. The Biden era vision was we look to de-incentivize polluting, sometimes through taxes, through regulations, through this kind of thing, encourage better practices, innovate to improve practice, and make polluters take responsibility and potentially pay. Now, this new vision is to do away with what they say is trillions of dollars worth of regulatory costs and hidden taxes in the name of what they say unleashing economic potential, and they package it also again as a cost of living measures. And at the end of the day, what they're doing is saving huge amounts of money to these corporations. Environmentalists have said that this plan heralds the greatest increase in pollution in decades for the United States.
So, Antonia, apart from deregulating, the EPA had also announced a plan to reconsider the so-called endangerment finding. That's not necessarily, well, it's not a regulation, it's a scientific document. So can you tell us what it is and why this portion of the announcement matters?
Absolutely. So in 1963, the Clean Air Act was passed. That was an aim to regulate toxic gases in the air. And for a long time, that law focused on gases that were harmful to the human inhaling them. In 2009, however, a finding was written into this act that recognises that gases that are not dangerous to the human inhaling them, but which caused climate change, which caused global warming, were also harmful. They said current and projected concentrations of CO2, methane, etc. endangered public health and the welfare of current and future generations. Now, this finding, written into the Clean Air Act, then made it possible and legal to regulate these gases and impose industry standards. Now, Lee Zeldin said yesterday when he was making these announcements, we are driving a dagger through the heart of climate change religion and ushering in America's golden age. Now, of course, climate change isn't a religion. It's a set of facts established by scientists on the basis of a huge body of evidence. So what we see here is a suggestion that you can change these facts through lawmaking, through changing policy. policy. Another example of this is the social cost of carbon. This is a calculation, admittedly subjective and difficult to come to a consensus on, that tries to take into account the long-term economic social cost of polluting. It's currently valued at about $190 a tonne, and that's taking into account potential crop damage, natural disasters, etc., as well as public health threats as a result of pollution. That's something else that they're talking about doing away with. They're certainly talking about reconsidering it. On Trump's very first day, his Unleashing American Energy executive order asked the EPA to look into cancelling it completely. So you have this idea that this is not just an attack on regulation, but an attack on things that scientists certainly view as absolute and proven truths, and the idea that you can take them out of regulation and sort of act around them as if they're not there.